Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here I am, John Sneisen, and at long last we are joined by the other John Doull, and it's been a while since you've been in a video with us, John. So today we're going to talk about Iran because there's a lot of talk about sanctions, there's potential regime change, it's hard to really tell, John will go into that in a moment, but so, you know, we've looked at this foreign entanglement of the United States and Iran going back a long time. Of course, there's a 53 military coup in Iran, which reinstated the Shah, and obviously, over the many years, the funding of the Iran-Iraq war through the Ba'athist Party via proxy wars that the United States got involved in, and it just never ends. And of course, it's always problem, reaction, solution, repeat, the Hegelian dialectic, where we see them arm and fund Iraq against Iran, and then go after Iraq, saying they have these weapons of mass destruction that they never actually found, but of course kind of leading into, well, we gave them these weapons so they might have these weapons still. I mean, it's again, problem, reaction, solution, repeat. And for this story, I'm gonna go to John Doull here, who has some quotes and some facts that he's got here regarding the most recent news in Iran, where Mike Pompeo is pushing really tough sanctions, and we know how that all ends up. But John, can you go into that?
Yeah, Mike Pompeo was speaking at the Heritage Foundation in Washington today, and he vowed that if Iran doesn't comply with the list of demands that the United States is going to be coming out with, that they'll face what he called the strongest sanctions in history. So on this list of demands, which he alluded to today, it included declaration of all nuclear material to the International Atomic Energy Association, allowance of unqualified IAEA access to all Iranian nuclear sites, for Iran to end all missile development, release all American hostages, and end support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as ending support for Houthi rebels in Yemen. And he also said that the Iranian regime should know this is just the beginning. He went on to say, the sting of sanctions will only grow more painful if the regime does not change course from the unacceptable and unproductive path it has chosen for itself and the people of Iran, adding, these will be the strongest sanctions in history by the time we are done.
So, I mean, he's been kind of, it's difficult to really gauge what he's getting at with regime change. You have something on that. Can you go into that?
Well, yeah, so he didn't allude directly to regime change in his speech at the Heritage Foundation today, but in remarks that he gave to the press after the speech, Pompeo said, I can't put a timeline on it, but at the end of the day, the Iranian people will decide the timeline. The Iranian people will get to make a choice about their leadership. If they make the decision quickly, that will be wonderful. If they choose not to do so, we will stay hard at this until we achieve the outcomes that I set forth. So pretty menacing saber rattling there.
Yeah, it seems to me that he's basically saying, do as we say or else, kind of in tune with, well, we aren't going to change the regime, but, you know, if the people in Iran want to live, you know, and not get bombed, they might want to rebel against the government. And, you know, of course, I don't think any of us could say we're pro-Iranian government. I'm not for any government. I'm a voluntarist, of course, but it does seem like this attack on Iran is based on the fact that they might be able to defend themselves and not be part of the global order. Of course, though, something that is kind of mixed up in translation is that a lot of people say, well, you know, Iran doesn't have a quote-unquote Rothschild-controlled central bank, but they have a central bank. The whole point is that they might not be coordinating like other central banks with other ones around the world, but they are still centralizing their economy, and this comes right as the Iranian Rial is suffering a massive devaluation, a huge attack on the currency out there, and this is all due to that centralization that we talk about. John, can you go into what's happening with the Iranian economy and how this plays so perfectly into this fall of their once, I guess you could say, flourishing, prospering economy?
Yeah, well, of course, Iran, their central bank, their Rial has, you know, since 2000, the Rial was 1447.5 to the US dollar, and well, now it's 42,050. So it's just a tremendous amount of loss of value that the Iranian Rial has had as well. And you're gonna see with that, people are gonna get very upset in the country, and they're gonna probably you went into the hidden CIA documents talking about how they were gonna topple Iran, try to use.
Well, that was Syria.
Oh, so, the Syria, sorry.
But I'm sure there are, CIA documents out there talking about Iran as well. I mean, they've been trying to overthrow them for a long time, like Syria.
Yeah, of course. And so, yeah, you got to look at, any type of instability. And now, of course, with the currency being, that's one of the major factors of any economy. Of course, you might see some attempts to try to really stir up the pot in Iran to try to create that regime change that they really want.
Well, I feel like this is like the perfect storm, John, because when we've seen in recent days the fall of the Rial in Iran, it seems to match up pretty well with the sanctions, and for them to be able to use this weakened, vulnerable time for the Iranian economy to then place even more sanctions and finally bring down the leadership or whatever you want to call it in Iran that they've been wanting to bring down for so long.
No, of course. I think, that there's, of course, with any central, planning and government, I think there's, going to be an issue. And especially when you marry the church and state, that's what they've done in Iran and a lot of the other, Middle Eastern countries.
When you marry the state and individuals, period, I'd say.
Oh, of course, yeah. So, yeah, it's the same thing. Well, government is a religion in itself. And then when you have two religions together, it's even worse. So, I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot of, tumultuous times coming in the Middle East, especially you have warmongers like Israel, desperately, probably bloodthirsty, wanting to attack as well.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I totally forgot to bring up, is the fact that Israel, of course, has been bombing Iranian facilities in Syria, and it's getting to the point where that actually brings Russia and China into the mix. It brings all these other countries into the mix, and people have to remember that this won't be just a conflict between the United States, Israel, and then Iran. This is going to be a conflict between the United States, Israel, Britain, France, Sweden, of course, all those guys, and then against, Russia, Iran, all these countries. And of course, as China recently spoken about in recent days, that they will take Russia's side in a military conflict with the United States. They made it very clear. They laid it out for everyone. Now, some people might say it's just demagoguing to the Russians that they said that, but I think that is wishful thinking. I'm not going to spread fear-mongering here, but I think that it's about time that people look at this and go, well, this is crazy. I as an individual, don't want to get involved in some conflict and be used as pawns to sacrifice for the king and the queen in these situations that I have nothing to do with. I didn't do some Iranian deal with, Iran under Obama. I didn't, put these sanctions on Iran. I didn't aggress against Russia. I didn't aggress against the United States. I didn't do any of this. I think it goes for both sides. Americans, Canadians, Russians, British, all these countries, the individuals within that country are kind of pushed into the victimhood of being used by the state for means of dependency, pushed by this all-powerful complex that we call the military-industrial complex, which is one of the biggest global governing powers in the world other than the central banks.
Yeah, and what you see, recently, the kind of push towards, a second Cold War. And I just want to mention something interesting that the Swedish government is about to send out to their people. It's called If the Crisis or the War Comes, and it actually talks in there about fake news and all that, like trying to, propagandize the population, real hardcore fear-mongering, in order to try to pit, of course, this is the Russians that are bad guys in here, of course.
Well, of course, it's Sweden basically telling, for the first time since 1961 during the Cold War, sending this pamphlet out telling everyone to become, a dependent slave of the military-industrial complex and
steal all your property.
Yeah, it's your duty to serve against this conflict that's arising because of crazy governments and central planning throughout the world. John, what do you think about this?
Well, just going back to the sanctions, it's bringing to mind Iraq. We saw how many people starved in Iraq and were horribly affected by the sanctions in the 90s, which, of course, Madeleine Albright said was worth it. But we don't know exactly what the nature of the sanctions will be yet, but for Pompeo to say they'll be the strongest sanctions in history, and he didn't just say the strongest U.S. sanctions, but just the strongest sanctions, period. They're obviously going to be pretty hard hitting. We've already seen some effect on Iran's economy. Maersk came out and said that they won't be doing any shipping in or out of Iran anymore. So that's huge global shipping giant, and something like that signals a pretty hard times for Iran. Yeah. Also, was reading about French energy giant Solar that had a multi-billion-dollar deal to develop a huge new oil field there. They're pulling out of that now, probably. So,
well, it's all these pressures from global governing bodies too.
Yeah, Iran is really under attack, and I think, as you were saying earlier, they're trying to put pressure on the people of Iran, as Pompeo explicitly said in his comments to the press there, that it's up to the people of Iran to get rid of their terrible regime there, or the U.S. was probably going to have to help. Yeah. And I think if we see rebellion against the government in Iran, again, not that the current regime is good there, but I think that a lot of it will probably be somewhat synthetic, and the U.S. will be funding that along with Israel and whoever else.
It's another proxy war, and let me just lay this out for everyone real quick, is that, first of all, Mike Pompeo is a complete fool. This is a guy that got into office as head of the CIA at the time, saying that his biggest priority was bringing down Julian Assange, because how dare people spread truth and information from the organized crime cartel that runs, world governing bodies. And obviously, there's a lot of people on this channel that still are big supporters of Trump, and this isn't 4D chess, folks. This isn't 3,562.5D chess. This is the global governing military industrial complex, central banking system, absolutely, that are taking control. The presidents don't have a say. No matter what Trump says, he isn't going to be able to change anything. It's the same with any other countries that we see in the world. We could say the same thing about a place like Canada, where a guy who can't even tie his own shoes and spit out a sentence is supposed to be managing the economy.
And socks, though.
Yeah. Well, the point is, it's absolutely foolish at this point to say, Donald Trump is making these decisions. Donald Trump has absolutely no say, and he's being used as a puppet, like all of us as individuals are being used as a puppet, and we should, at this point, be rebelling. But of course, we just wait to see what happens, and then things happen, and then we just wait to see what happens next, and then more things happen, and then we die apathetic on our knees instead of, die standing up. And that is the most important point to make, is that we cannot allow ourselves to be used as pawns again. I mean, how many times do we have to be over this? Economies crashing, fiat empire, central banking system, centralization of society, plus this organized crime cartel we call government, constantly enslaving us into servitude and dependence. They depend on our dependence, and that is a major point to make, is that we are succumbing to this illness of statism to the point where we bend our knee to the idea of, well, this government is more powerful than us. This government says they're doing a good thing for us. They're here to help us, and then we end up, dying on a field, within a cage, kind of like a cattle on a farm, eating the grass, believing that everything is fine because they got grass to eat, but they're still in a cage, and then they get let off to the slaughter with a smile on their face. Bottom line, John?
Well, bottom line is that, you always have had this throughout history, where you have states that are kind of independent. They don't want to be part of the big empire. And of course, the empire's crushing boot comes down when anybody dares to, withstand them. And just look at the big major empires like the Roman Empire, the Greek, the Portuguese, the Dutch empires,
Byzantine.
British, yeah. All of them have, always grown to an extent of just massiveness, and it's just so unsustainable. And we did just a video about the craziness of the American debt and what they've done, with their fiat currency. And that's what every government does, and that's why they have the communist central bank running things. And the banksters, they are the ones, trying to pit people up against each other because they need the military industrial complex to, make some money again. They gotta have to create some bombs that are gonna kill some more people. It's just natural outcome of this great fantastic world we live in, where the big fascist corporations collude with the government, and you got full control, and you gotta have to start a war somehow, or a big war, because they gotta have to start making some profits. Like they've been very little, there's been constant war, but there's been very little that they could actually, make some serious profits, other than, buying back their own shares, going into debt, and manipulating their share price up.
It's always interesting how the fascist cartels and the communist cartels work together in the long run. It all comes full circle on the scale of collectivism. Bottom line, John?
We don't want war. Let's hopefully avoid war here.
Yeah, I mean, it really is as simple as that.
Heads prevail, yeah.
Yeah, we need to be able to stand up as individuals, though, and stop being apathetic. It's just so frustrating to see people say, well, Clinton is change, Bush is change, Obama is change, Trump is change. So we lay back apathetic to wait to see what happens rather than take action as individuals, which we are intrinsically supposed to be. Just individuals, not part of some coercive collective of state and these global powers. You honestly think this benefits any of us? No, it benefits global powers, banking cartels, and global governing cartels, and we as individuals need to break free, because in the end it comes down to us doing our own due diligence and being responsible for ourselves and independent, as that is the hallmark of freedom itself. Freedom isn't going overseas and killing innocent people and then losing our own lives at the same time. It's just absolutely insane. So thanks for going into this, both of you, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson, John Doull, John Sneisen, signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube, as the ADL comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. Also, check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also find us at steemit.com at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in Steem, the cryptocurrency. And also find us at the Red Pill Expo, which we have a reference link for below in the description and the comments as well. Hosted by G. Edward Griffin, amazing speakers coming out to speak this year. Don't miss it. It's in Spokane, Washington, June 21st to 23rd. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Wow.